Imagine waking up tomorrow and everything you thought was secure is suddenly gone. Your job disappeared, your savings worthless, your future uncertain. Now, imagine that happening not just to you, but to millions of people at the same time. Entire families losing homes overnight, banks shutting their doors without warning, businesses collapsing like dominoes. This wasn't fiction. It wasn't exaggerated. It was everyday life in America during the Great Depression. But here's what makes this moment in history so important. It didn't just destroy lives, it reshaped an entire nation. The Great Depression forced America to rethink everything: how its economy works, what role government should play, and what security really means. In this video, we're diving deep into how this one crisis changed America forever, not just in the 1930s, but in ways that still shape life today. To understand the collapse, we first need to understand the illusion. The 1920s were a time of excitement. People called it the Roaring Twenties for a reason. New technologies were transforming everyday life: cars, radios, household appliances. Cities were growing, businesses were booming, and perhaps most importantly, people believed the good times would never end. The stock market became a symbol of that optimism. Ordinary Americans weren't just saving money, they were investing. But here's the catch. Many weren't using their own money. They were buying stocks on margin, borrowing money to invest. It was like building a skyscraper on a fragile foundation. As long as prices kept rising, everything looked fine. But if they fell, everything would collapse. And behind the scenes, there were other problems too. Factories were producing more goods than people could afford to buy. Farmers were struggling with falling prices. Wealth was unevenly distributed. So while it looked like prosperity, it wasn't sustainable. It was a bubble, and bubbles always burst. In October 1929, that bubble finally burst. Panic hit Wall Street. Investors rushed to sell their stocks, but there weren't enough buyers. Prices plummeted. Billions of dollars vanished in a matter of days. For many, it wasn't just money. It was their life savings. At first, people hoped the economy would recover quickly, but instead, things got worse. Banks began to fail, and when banks failed, people lost everything they had deposited. Imagine going to your bank to withdraw your savings, only to find the doors locked. No insurance, no backup plan, nothing. Fear spread. People rushed to withdraw their money, which caused even more banks to collapse. It became a vicious cycle. Businesses couldn't get loans, factories shut down, workers were laid off. The system wasn't just slowing down, it was breaking. Now let's step into the lives of ordinary people during this time, because statistics only tell part of the story. The real impact was human. Unemployment soared to about 25%. That's 1 out of every 4 workers. But behind that number are real people. Parents who couldn't feed their children, families forced out of their homes, young people with no hope of finding work. Entire communities were struggling. People built makeshift homes out of scrap materials: wood, metal, cardboard. These areas became known as Hoovervilles. Food became one of the biggest concerns. Bread lines stretched for blocks. Soup kitchens handed out whatever they could. People who once lived comfortably now depended on charity just to survive. And pride made it even harder. Many people weren't used to asking for help, but they had no choice. Even highly educated individuals, teachers, engineers, professionals, took whatever work they could find. Selling apples on the street, cleaning buildings, doing manual labor. There was no safety net, no unemployment benefits, no guaranteed support. If you lost your job, you were on your own. And that experience left a deep mark on an entire generation. As conditions worsened, people began to demand change. The old approach, waiting for the economy to fix itself, wasn't working. Something had to be done. This moment marked a turning point in American history. A new vision began to emerge. What if the government could step in, not just as a regulator, but as an active force to stabilize the economy? This idea was controversial. For decades, many Americans believed the government should stay out of economic life, but the crisis challenged that belief. When millions are suffering, doing nothing is no longer an option. This shift in thinking paved the way for one of the most significant transformations in U.S. history. The response came in the form of sweeping reforms and programs designed to address the crisis. This period introduced a new relationship between the government and its citizens. Programs were created to provide jobs. Millions of people were put to work building infrastructure, roads, bridges, parks, schools. These weren't just temporary fixes, they shaped the physical landscape of the country for decades to come. At the same time, the financial system was restructured. New regulations were introduced to prevent risky behavior by banks. Deposits were protected so people wouldn't lose everything if a bank failed. This restored trust in the system. Another major shift was the creation of long-term support systems. Programs were introduced to help people during unemployment and provide security in old age. For the first time, there was a sense that citizens wouldn't be completely abandoned during hard times. This was a radical change. The government was no longer just an observer. It became a participant, a stabilizer, a safety net. And that transformation still defines the system today. While policies and programs changed the structure of the country, the Depression also changed people. Those who lived through it developed a very different mindset. They became cautious, they saved money whenever possible, they avoided unnecessary risks, they valued stability over speculation. Small habits reflected this mindset: saving leftovers, reusing materials, planning for worst-case scenarios. These weren't just behaviors, they were survival strategies, and they were passed down through generations. The Depression also changed how people viewed success. Before, success was often seen as purely individual. Afterward, people understood that external forces, economic conditions, systemic failures, could impact anyone. It created a deeper sense of empathy and a stronger belief that society has a responsibility to support its members during crises. The Great Depression also became a lesson book for the future. Economists, policymakers, and leaders studied what went wrong, and more importantly, what could prevent it from happening again. Today, governments intervene during economic downturns. They adjust interest rates, they increase spending, they provide financial support. These actions are rooted in the lessons learned during the Depression. It showed that waiting too long can make things worse, that confidence matters, that stability matters, and that intervention, when done carefully, can prevent collapse. In many ways, modern economic policy was shaped by this period. So how did the Great Depression change America forever? It changed the role of government from passive to active. It reshaped the economy, introducing safeguards and oversight. It redefined expectations. People began to expect protection during hard times. And it transformed the national mindset, creating a culture of caution, resilience, and awareness. Many systems we take for granted today were born out of this crisis. Without the Depression, America would look very different. The Great Depression was one of the most painful periods in American history, but it was also one of the most transformative. Out of uncertainty came reform. Out of hardship came innovation. Out of collapse came rebuilding. And maybe that's the deeper lesson. Sometimes, the moments that challenge a nation the most are the ones that redefine it, not just for years, but for generations. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about what changed and what stayed changed forever.